This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day, carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fully Managed by Penji podcast, the podcast where we discuss marketing and business tips to help assist you on your business journey. I'm your host, Shannon, Penji's Partnership Coordinator, and I'm joined here today with a very special guest, Lindsay Kirsh from Slayer PR. Thank you so much for coming on with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So, first I wanted to get into, and I know I asked you a little bit about this in our call before this, but can you talk about how you came up with the name of your business? Because I think it's very unique and I really like it. And I'm sure the fellas at home would love to know.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. I think, overall, I'm happy with the name because it's probably the most important question people seem to ask me. I'm just kidding. So always been a music fan. I would say it's my number one passion. And while we all know the band Slayer, not necessarily named after the band, I really loved the edge to it as a bold, fearless brand. And it was representative of who I am and how I wanted this agency to function. So bringing in both.
I really like that. I like when the name reflects what the work is, because I think it's hard to encompass that in one word, and most people are trying to go for that. So I think this is something that really works and it's very unique to you.
Absolutely. And it was a struggle at first, coming up with a name for the agency, because we think about it in terms of how do we want it to come across? And while working through it, I felt like nothing was really representative of who I was. So if you're going to think of a name for an agency, it's got to be your own personal brand as well to really have that passion.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. A lot of people struggle with finding that, and I think that it's really great that you were able to yeah, create something that is refreshing and unique. So, could you okay, so you've already explained the name, which I feel like I got a little too overzealous. Could you please give a little synopsis about everything that you do, like kind of your how your day-to-day is right now, where your agency is and its cycle and all that good stuff?
Sure. So Slayer is obviously focused on public relations, and we service clients across food and beverage, lifestyle, um, consumer and luxury brands. A day to day for our team, I feel like so many business owners will say the same thing. Every day really is a new adventure. We structure it, we know what our deliverables are, we know what our deadlines are, but we're always reaching for more, especially as a new business. So a lot of my personal day to day is business development and creating strategy. My team, we're working on execution, and really mentoring them as well. They are excellent. They've got great experience, but there's so much, that we can all work collectively on. And I'm constantly learning from them too.
That's my favorite thing about agencies. I love being able to learn constantly. I think that's like one of my favorite things about I already said one of my favorite things. Wow. But no, I really like that part about agencies and marketing specifically is that it's a constant learning environment. I feel like you can learn from your clients, but you can also learn from all the people around you, and it's a world that's constantly changing. It's not something that's finite. So it's definitely for the person that wants to continue to learn and grow, and I love and admire that, people are adjusting to that because it's just, like, really good to hear.
Absolutely. And, to go back to the people piece, I always think that that's most important. I think if you want to run a successful business, you need to be empowering your team. Without your team, who are you? And you want to make sure that people are showing up every day, enthusiastic, ambitious, and that they feel like they have skin in the game. And that's really the environment that I foster at Slayer.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that the team is really like it's the critical part. I think that I ask a lot of agency owners or CEOs or founders about their successes and things like that. And I think my favorite thing to hear is, be like having created like a beautiful team, because I think that being viewed as a success, it is a success, but a lot of people don't think about that version of success like as a collective. They think about like their own personal goals and achievements. And that's my favorite thing to hear, because it's like that they're centered in the collective and their everyone that they work with, and how they're all involved in creating this end goal and like this like beautiful thing, and creating good work for their clients. And that's
Exactly.
yeah, so it's great to hear, because I don't hear it enough, and I wish I would hear it more, to be honest.
You
Um,
all do. And I hope that, anyone who's listening can take note if they're not already traveling down that path is it always needs to be people first, clients first, and people first. But I think that you continue to build up your client base when you have that cohesive, excited team.
yeah, exactly. You want them to be excited about doing the work, because I really think it shows in the work when people aren't excited
Yeah.
to do it. And that's not really easy. So your agency is, you said it was newer, and I looking into it, I understand that. So can you kind of talk about how from its creation to now, how you kind of been able to grow it to this point?
Yeah, you know what? It's never an easy road to venture out and start your own business. And I knew that it was something I always wanted to do after 15 years in the corporate world. So I formed Slayer in April of 2023. Having never run a business, it was a big learning curve to be able to learn the back end of it, as well as do business development, you know, execute all the projects. So it was juggling a lot. And then we fast forward, and as I continue to learn, it's amazing to see the growth in the span of a year where I've developed a team and we're continuing to grow as we bring on more clients. So it's always great, when you can take a step back and look at where you started to where you're going, but also have, that plan. And it's interesting because, again, when I started, I'd never done a financial plan for my business because I've never had a business. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, how does this work? How do I do it? What are these projections? I've always handled client budget. But to create a budget for yourself is an entirely different beast. So it's all these small things from a year ago until now, what I've been able to learn.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it's nice that it's a learning process just as much as it is a growth process, because you don't really I think unless you have a background in a different field as well, like a lot of people, they'll start a business and they'll have a background in accounting or like different financial services, and those are really helpful, but there's always those different subjects that you just don't know anything about, or you know a little bit about, but not enough that you need to research it, or you need to hire another agency to help you with those things.
Exactly. And, you just raised an interesting point about hiring another agency. So we form strategic partnerships as well. And I think it's really great to establish those relationships within the profession to, you know, bandwidth is low, to bring in another team of trusted experts and also float projects back and forth if it's not within our scope. And the other piece of that too is the greatest advice I think that I got when I started out was you can't be working for your business. You need to be working on it. And I was juggling so many different projects, like I said, from business development to the book to everything that you could imagine and then some. And I had to take a step back and re strategize, thinking to myself, is this an efficient use of my time? Or do I need to be investing, in people sooner than I thought that I would? And I think that, starting a business is all an investment across the board. You're investing in yourself, you're investing in the business, and you're investing in your people. And as I build this team out, it's incredible how much more efficient we've become.
Yeah, no, that something. I think a lot of people may not get earlier on. And I think that being able to like where you putting all your eggs in one basket, or like realizing what you can do by yourself, but what you need to like give to someone else. And a lot of people will try to do all of it themselves. And maybe that's what they need to do in the beginning because they don't have maybe the money or the resources to be able to put towards another subject. But I think it's really important, and it shows a lot on growth and how you're thinking about things to be able to figure out which category you fall into, like what you can handle and what you think would be better for someone else to do, because you gotta just figure out what do you do best, and then like what is something that like maybe you can do, but why would you, or like why would you waste your time doing that when you like do this better and it would affect how you do that well if you're doing this other thing.
Exactly. And I've had a lot of mentors along the way in this past year through these new relationships, and they've just been incredibly invaluable to learn from them. Like you said earlier, like we were discussing, it's a constant learning process, and we need to make sure that we're always learning.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And that's like my favorite thing to hear is marketing is changing, and you can't be stuck in like a certain headspace because you have to think about all of these things that are constantly changing in the world, in the country. So many things have been impacting spaces like this COVID big one.
Oh,
And that is a lot to navigate around. So everyone has to be constantly thinking about these things. And when they don't, it might be at a detriment to them or their business.
100%.
Okay, so a little quick segue. So would you be able to kind of tell me, I think something that's really important throughout the process of agency work is communicating with customers. Can you tell me kind of like how your strategy, particularly for what you think works well, and how you make a customer feel cared about and is enjoying the process as along with the end result?
Absolutely. So, before I started Slayer, I worked in-house and I also worked agency side. So I was able to see both sides of that spectrum in terms of client communication and expectations. And for me and for Slayer, we are committed to having our biweekly status updates with clients and always being available via email, especially if there's a crisis situation. We need to be on call and we need to ensure that our clients feel like they have access to the team because, especially in public relations, things change so fast. There's an opportunistic moment that we want to seize. So we don't try, we do have biweekly meetings. I should correct myself there. Our goal is to have that. And it really just depends on how much or how little the client wants to communicate. The other side of that is, and what I tell clients is, the relationship is 50-50. We are only as good as our client's communication as well. And if we're not being looped in or informed of any status updates, any last minute changes to projects, communication breaks down. And obviously, communication is what we do. And we know outside of work, communication is everything to avoid any misunderstandings. So I think a successful relationship goes both ways, but we are committed to keeping that regular cadence open with our clients.
I really appreciate what you said about that the communication goes both ways, because like on one side obviously, but on the other side for agencies specifically, I think that's something that's really important. For PR, I can't even imagine how unbelievably important that is for them to let you know what's going on at all times, because you're there to help them. But for all services, um like an agency work in general, there's this disconnect where you're expected to do something for the client, but they're not giving you all of the information. Like even for something maybe more simpler where we just do design, if they're unhappy with the end result but didn't tell us throughout the process, like, hey, I don't like this part of it or something, then how are they going to like the end product
Exactly.
if
And
they
I believe that we all need to hold ourselves accountable as well. Accountability has always been a big thing for me. It's core to my character. And I think that when everybody can take accountability, we can move on a lot quicker if there was a struggle or there was a miscommunication. And probably speak for a lot of people in my industry and anyone, servicing clients. Again, it goes back to setting clear expectation, goals and objectives, but everybody contributing and following up on their deliverables without placing blame.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. You have to be able to be like, I messed up when you mess up. And you also have to be transparent about it with a customer or a client because they're, yeah, they might be upset, but they also might not sever the relationship if you're like, hey, I messed up, but I can fix this. And you do. I mean, but if they find out that you covered something up, because you're trying to fix it without them knowing, that feels skeezy and wrong. And it is skeezy and wrong. And I
And
think
it really
that
deteriorates the trust. Exactly.
exactly. Transparency and trust go hand in hand. Agency work is you're doing a service for someone, they're expecting you to do it right. And we're human and people do things wrong, and that's okay. But you have to communicate throughout that entire process and be able to kind of pivot if something's not going the way that you want.
Exactly.
So actually, okay, that's a great follow-up question. So if that happens, say that happens to you, we would we would hope that, agency work, it all goes great and it's always great and we always do amazing work and we're perfect humans and nothing bad ever happens. But say something does, how do you kind of go through that process? How do you kind of pivot, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Just refocus and talk to the client and kind of create a new plan.
So, what I like to do is think about things internal before we go external to the client, and regroup with the team to really, again, have that open dialogue, communicate where was the breakdown, what went wrong. And before we communicate with the client, I always make sure that we have a solution. We never ever want to speak to a client and just say, hey, we screwed up, period. Never, ever, ever. So it's, having that internal alignment with your team, coming up with that great solution and taking that to the client so that they see, okay, so there was a mistake or we're not happy with the end product, but at least this agency is coming up with a solution because that's why they hired us. We are the counsel for them and we are supposed to come up with those solutions and we need to be coming up with those solutions. And I think that the best approach, as I was saying, is to take 5 minutes, let's say, maybe a little bit more than 5 minutes, and communicate with your client and say, you know what, we're regrouping internally and we're going to set up this meeting with you at such and such a time, and we're going to correct the situation. Have that internal alignment before you take it out the door.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with that and I definitely agree. I like the idea of coming up with a solution as well as explaining the problem because I definitely agree that clients aren't going to be happy with hearing bad news ever. But if there's good news that comes with that, it's more easily digestible.
Exactly. It just shows your commitment to the client and that you value their business as much as they do.
Yeah, and it maybe you can be in the process of trying to figure out why what happened and didn't go out it didn't wasn't the outcome you expected, but um a client doesn't usually want to they want to hear they want to hear why, how are you going to fix it? And I think coming to that at the forefront of the issue is very critical. Oh, did you freeze?
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. I bet
Oh,
you
I
froze
am
for a
here.
moment. It's all okay. We've been all having some weather issues, Wi-Fi issues. It's all happening.
Always at the
So,
most convenient times.
oh, it's always at the most inconvenient times because you could be home all weekend, nothing to do, and then nothing happens then. But then you have 5 meetings scheduled in a row, and that's when you lose your Wi-Fi.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah, exactly. So, we talked about communication styles. So how do you okay, do you do formal proposals often?
All the time. So
Okay.
our process for recruiting business is we will have a discovery call with a prospective client to
Mhm.
understand what their goals are, to understand what their objectives are. And then we regroup internally and we will give a very high level proposal that we will submit to the prospective client, with what those opportunities look like, just giving them, a taste of what they can expect with us. And hopefully, we can seal the deal with that client and then we just get to work. And that initial high level plan becomes a real entire plan for an extended period. But I always think it's important to share your capabilities deck, to have that discovery call, and most importantly, ask the right questions
Mhm.
on those discovery calls. Come prepared. For public relations, as an example, and what I can speak to is always asking the question, have you hired a PR agency before? What
Mhm.
have you done in the past PR wise? Been internal, external, both, what worked and what didn't work, because that gives us a better sense of what their expectations are. So always asking those qualifying questions, following up with a proposal deck, and then fingers crossed, you bring them on board.
In your opinion, is what should you not include in your proposal? Like, do you think people may often do that's like at a detriment to them?
So I think that there's two things, and I am guilty of it, and I have been guilty of it, and it's something that I am working on. I think that we are very excited about our businesses as entrepreneurs, and we absolutely should be. But we can't assume that people have time to go through 35 slides. So that's one thing. So my advice is condensing those decks, and just really giving that high level of what your service offering is and show results. Clients want to see results before they work with you. It's basically your reference point for the quality of work, what your relationships are. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is when we're following up after the discovery call and we're working on those high level pitches, we don't want to give it all away. Um, and that's another learning lesson. Again, we're very excited and we want to show what our capabilities are, focus on that specific client, what those areas of opportunity are. But if you're giving away the whole plan, why is the
What are you
plan?
They can just
And that's
leave.
a good thing from it. So it's finding those nuggets where, you're wetting their palate just enough, but they don't necessarily have the manpower, the bandwidth, or the experience to execute.
Yeah,
And then they
that's actually something that I didn't even think about, and maybe this is why I'm not in PR, but no, that's really interesting because I would never even think about that, but that makes so much sense because if you lay out the plan for them, they can just leave from that meeting and be like, "Okay, this is what we need to do." And then they go back and they do that.
exactly. And you know what? Um, I remember the days of having job interviews and they were lengthy and consumed a lot of time. But obviously, as the applicant, you want to do everything you can to get the job, kind of like
Mhm.
landing a client. However, one thing that always got to me was when they would ask me to create an example plan for them. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so I'm going to have to do that. You're interviewing who knows how many candidates. So you're going to get all of these plans in, and now you can take it and run. There's no guarantee that I'm going to get the job. And I've just spent all of this time doing that when I think that an interview or two should be sufficient.
Mhm.
Going back to the decks and the follow ups should be sufficient enough to build that trust with you do all this and use your time because it takes a lot of time to put these together. It takes a lot of thought. And, as a small business, we want to make sure that we are effectively using that time.
Yeah, it's a very important thing as a smaller business to have to allocate your time correctly. I think not even just as a smaller business, it's everywhere is really important to allocate your time correctly, but um especially if you don't have the same amount of resources as a larger business, you have to be able to pick and choose what's important at the time.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
And I think the other pieces too, when we're going through this process is put yourself in the client's shoes. Imagine you're the prospective client reading that plan and write it that way. Because we think from our creative brains, but what would I want to see if I was hiring an agency? Having worked in-house and having worked on the agency side and now my own agency, that's really also how I think about it too. And if we're not being mindful of that and playing that role as we write these plans, it can be a detriment as well.
Yeah, you have to I think a lot of agencies have trouble like getting out of their own heads, and obviously all services are supposed to cater towards the client, but I think that a lot of people will assume that, and like, yeah, you might do great work and that's great, but also you have to do great work for a very specific person or a very specific business or a very specific whatever it may be. And a lot of agencies assume they know best, and it goes back to the learning of your client might know better than you for a specific part of something. Like, yes, they're hiring you, so clearly they don't know some things. Or maybe they don't maybe they do know everything and they just don't have the resources to implement it, and that's why they're hiring you. But um
Exactly.
you have to be able to listen to your client and their needs, and they could be wrong. And that happens too. Do you ever have a time where you have to convince a client to do something because you think they're wrong?
Often, our brand, as I was saying earlier, and who we are is we're bold, we're fearless, we're direct, and we get to it. And I think that clients hire us because they do like that approach. Now, when it comes to putting a plan together, our plans reflect that personality. Um, Within reason, of course, as we were saying, with respect to the client voice, what their objectives are. But we always like to push and say, maybe we do something a little bit more unconventional because that's how we separate ourselves as an agency. We don't believe in rinse and repeat or, one size fits all approach to our clients. No, we like to encourage them and push the limits a bit, take that leap of faith. And, there's always a contingency plan, which we hope we never have to use. But it is encouraging brands to really take that step out and emboldening them as well. And it's
Yeah.
so much fun when they're willing to get creative and, pivot a little bit from what they've done. And it's fine if what they've been doing has worked, that's great. But it's only going to work for so long. And
Yeah,
we
they
may
need
as
a
well
long
change
term.
that up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, they need a long-term plan. A lot of people will, create something that works, but they don't look at the projected future of that plan continuing to work, and that's why they're hiring you. That's the important part.
That's right. We have to think ahead of the curve, not, meeting it where it's at. And Jeff Bezos said a long time ago, and don't quote me verbatim, but it's all about anticipating the needs of a
Mhm.
customer before they even know that they need it. And that's
True.
always been fascinating to me. And that's how you stay ahead of the curve, is thinking about it that way. Like, let's come up with something that they don't even know they need or want, and then sell them in on it because it's that unique.
Yeah, I really like that, and that I think that is a perfect sentiment to end on. Not to cut you short, but I think that's actually a great place. I hate when I have to cut off at a part that doesn't make sense, and I think that was like a really great message to end on. Is
I'm
everyone
glad. Real quick.
It's like textbook. Thank you so. But yeah, that was absolutely incredible. I really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I learned a lot. I will literally say this every podcast, but my favorite part about this is learning. So it's really great to be able to have people like you on to be able to teach me something.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Shannon, for taking the time to meet with me today. And like I said, learning is ongoing, and that's what we love to do, is to teach and to learn.
Heck yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much again. And everyone that is watching at home or listening, don't forget to like and subscribe to see more professionals like Lindsay on the podcast. Thank you again. And I hope you guys enjoyed.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.